Welcome to Empathy Empire, where we interview the most empathetic people on the planet. I'm your host, Kim Smiley. Amanda Jewson is a registered social worker, certified sleep consultant, and the host of the Slumber Party Podcast. Amanda, I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
It's so great to meet you in person.
Yes, I met you once before in person. It was literally, actually, I can tell you what it was. I was in an elevator. We were going to an event, and I remember you walked in, and my first thought was like, wow, that person is very fabulous. You look so amazing. And then you chatted with me, and then we went off and did things, and then you were a panelist. And I was like, see, I knew it.
I remember.
It was a mom boss event.
Boss event at Shopify.
Yes, that's exactly where I met you.
Yes.
But it was a million years ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah,
it was
I think I had dark
7
hair
years
then.
ago.
Yeah, it was pre my gray hair.
Right. That was a good event.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good.
Yeah, it was really good. Okay, so the first question I have for you is, how did you sleep last night?
Okay. Funny question. I'm a great sleeper.
Okay.
Last night was a weird sleep because my husband travels for work. And so I struggle with sleep if I know that he's coming or going. And so he had to be up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I get it into my head, oh my gosh, he's going to be up. Is he going to wake me up? So I would rate it a solid 7 out of 10. Most nights are a 9 to 10. I'm a really good sleeper.
And are your kids good sleepers?
Yes.
How old are your kids?
They are 10 and 8.
And is your husband a good sleeper?
Yes.
And is this attributable to you?
Great question. I think I really have a big philosophical belief about energy, right? So I think that I have always been obsessed with sleep. I love sleep. I did not have a curfew growing up. I was kind of annoying to my friends because I'd be like, I would like to go to the club, but then I would also like to be in bed at a reasonable hour. And they were like, it's like 11:30. I'm like, I know, I'm ready to go to bed. So I think that your kids and your family just pick up on things that you're already doing, right? So I think my kids came out good sleepers. They have pretty easy temperaments. I think that there's some biology, but I also think it's always been a family priority.
So you were a certified sleep consultant before you had children?
No. So this is a funny story. And I don't have that story. Like most sleep consultants will tell you, like, I was sleep deprived and then I hired a sleep consultant and they changed my life. And then now I want to do that. And that's not at all my story. It was like, everyone I know in my life called me when I was pregnant and was like, if you don't know about baby sleep, now you should know because we know you need sleep, babies don't sleep. So, while people are like decorating nurseries, I was reading everything about baby sleep and my kids came out and I did these like little things and they slept well. They always slept well. So I became someone who was known in my circle as like someone whose kids always slept well. People would always ask me advice. And then 2 friends hired sleep consultants when I had my second. And this was kind of like a new thing at the time. So this is like 2016. And I'm like, what is a sleep consultant? What is this thing? And so my friend had sort of shared, like, I had told my friend, by the way, what to do for free. And then she hired someone to tell her the exact same thing I told her. And I was like, I think I should do this. Like, I was teaching. I was like, I love sleep. I'm passionate. This is something I'm already doing. So I trained after the birth of my second child. I will say, I didn't experience sleep deprivation with my first, like not in that way. Like truly, I probably did, but it didn't really impact me. But with the birth of my second child, I really, like I had my 2-year-old and I have a little mini baby who is still getting up, but I also have to I can't, lounge around the next day like I did with my first. So I really did experience the impact of sleep deprivation, but even then my kids were great sleepers. So then anyway, I had my kids. A close friend of mine really, really struggled with sleep, and I saw her sort of like lose that part of herself, that spark. Just, she didn't want to go outside. It really became a preoccupation.
Because she had a baby?
because she had a baby and her baby wouldn't sleep. And it became like this obsession, and it becomes an obsession for lots of folks. And then I was like, okay, I think that there's a space here that I hope to encourage people to sleep, and that if they had to quote unquote sleep train, it's not horrible. There's a lot of really good evidence around it. And then the rest is history.
What you said you were a teacher. What type of teacher were you?
I taught middle school, primarily grade 8. Like, it found me wherever I went. So I'm trained to teach middle school and high school. I taught in Toronto for a year. I taught grade 8. Then I moved to Australia with my husband, and I worked in Australia for 4 years. I taught mostly high school. And then when I came back, I focused again on middle school. And then I ended my career in teaching middle school girls specifically, which was amazing. Super fun. It's like a dream.
That's great. And I'm sure that your background as a teacher really helps you help parents and help other people who have insomnia. So I just want to dispel something. I think a lot of people think of you as a sleep trainer for babies, but it's much broader than that, what you do.
Yeah. I started out just working with babies, and then it became a question from all of my parents. Okay, now my child is sleeping, I'm not sleeping. Or parents would hire me because they've never slept. They would say, sleep hygiene was never a priority, or, my parents always helped me to sleep. I don't want that for my child. And I should say, I don't judge or think everyone should stop helping their child to sleep. I do believe that whatever a parent wants, whether that's to help their child or sleep independently, whatever you are kind of working against will be a problem. So if someone is like, you should co-sleep, but you don't want to, there's always going to be like an energetic disconnect. And if someone is like, you need to sleep independently and you don't want to, that's going to create yuckiness. I just want to help people who already want to do that and I'm not here to convince anyone of that. But that is why people hire me. And then I slowly learned over time, this sleep consulting thing with babies is really about counseling moms, and I don't have those official skills to do that or those qualifications. And B, I don't know how to help adult sleepers yet, and I really want to figure out what that is. So I went back to school and I became a registered social worker, and I trained in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia for adults. And the really cool thing about that is it mimics so much of what I do with babies, but for adults. So generally, adults aren't sleeping because they're reliant on certain behaviors, certain environments, or really in the cognitive behavioral therapy part is really about certain beliefs that are limiting a client's ability to sleep.
Interesting. Talk to me more about that.
So I have a lot of clients who come to me and they will say something like, I can only sleep if I am on the couch with the TV on. I can't sleep in my bed. I go to my bed and immediately I put my head on the pillow and my eyes are open. So I can sleep and can get great sleep if that. So that belief really becomes ingrained in the brain. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. A lot of, you can't sleep if you tell yourself, everything is like that. That's life, right? So it really becomes about, no, let's actually deal with that uncomfortable feeling in the bed that you have. Because if you want to sleep in your bed, which a lot of people do, because sleeping on the couch is limiting in terms of how many hours of sleep that they can get. Maybe the couch isn't actually comfortable anymore. And these are people who really want to make those changes. So it's okay, no, when you're in the bed, what are you feeling? What's coming up for you? It's probably anxiety. It's probably stress. It's uncomfortable. And so let's target that and then figure out what that is and actually help you believe that you can be in that bed sleeping. And how we do this, it's not I'm not magic. I always say we use what the body is naturally doing. So people forget that sleep is it is as important as drinking water, eating food. It is not, we actually don't get to choose it. Our body has a whole system set up to make it happen. There are parts of our brain specifically designed to help us sleep. So the only time we are not sleeping is when our arousal system is so high, and that means like stress, anxiety, and then your body says, oh goodness, there's a threat. There's that wolf outside. There's something. You need to be hyper vigilant to save yourself. That's the only time we can really overcome those systems. So we work on reducing overall stress with clients, but then we use what the body is already doing. So we might do something like sleep restriction therapy, which sounds scary. So that's basically saying if someone has a bad night of sleep, the impulse is to say, I'm going to go to bed early. But then we go to bed early and we actually have a hard time falling asleep. And then we create behaviors like, oh, actually, when I'm in the bed, I don't fall asleep. And so that becomes ingrained. So what we do is we say, no, we don't go to bed early anymore. We're actually going to push that. We're going to push your sleep pressure. So that's that homeostatic sleep pressure that's happening in the brain. And so we make it really, really, really high. So it overwhelms your system and you have to sleep. So if that person who's sleeping on the couch, I put them into bed, let's say at 12 o'clock. They've been putting themselves to bed at 9:30 for whatever. So now there's like 3 hours more of sleep pressure. They're going to fall asleep. They're going to start believing, oh my gosh, I can fall asleep. And then we also combine that with something called stimulus control, which is getting the person out of the bed when they're experiencing stress. So if they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping, okay, no problem, get up. We're going to have that feeling outside of the bed. So then we reassociate that stress outside of the bed. And it's incredible. Like, I mean, there aren't enough practitioners doing it, and I know why. It is so effective. Like, if I only focus my only practice on this, I would be kind of like bored because I can't even get people to 4 sessions because they are sleeping. It's so amazing.
The bed becomes a sacred space almost.
Yeah, and we really take the teeth out of the bed. It's amazing what your brain can do. Like when you're actually having success, your brain starts reassociating really quickly. Like we totally underestimate our ability for change.
As adults too, because I think a lot of people think only kids can have quick rewiring, but adults can as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of new research about how the brain is far more, our ability to change. We used to think like 20, it stops. Like that's not true. It can always change and adapt.
The malleability of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
One of the limiting beliefs that I've always had about sleep is that I have a genetic predisposition to insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if that is actually an accurate thing. Do people have genetic tendencies towards certain sleep disorders?
Yes. I mean, so when we are looking at, if you were a client, I would take you in and we would do an assessment and we look at the predisposing factors of insomnia. So these are things like a genetic component. So you very well may have a genetic component. I'm always curious about the genetics of that because sleep is so behavioral that it might be that a learned behavior from a parent or like how you have been taught about sleep might be perpetuating itself. But let's say it's genetic, you can still overcome that. So we call it your predisposing factors. So things like anxious behaviors, anxious thinking, again, that genetic component, you'll probably have one or more family members who also struggle with sleep. Then we have the perpetuating factors. So these are things that we keep doing. So you're predisposed to anxiety or to insomnia. You are probably doing things to keep it going, like laying in bed awake when you should be out of your bed or putting yourself to bed early, or all of the things that we do to perpetuate those things. So those perpetuating factors, like I have a visual when I work with clients and I show like, if we say this line is the baseline, like you're going to experience insomnia when you get above that line, your predisposing factors are always under the line. They're there, and mine might look like this. Yours might look like this, but it's the stuff that we do to keep you in that spot. And generally, like folks who have those predisposing factors, they can probably, for my insomniacs, they can link back to a specific event that started the insomnia. For me, it's generally the birth of children for many of my clients. There's a stressful event. a sale of a house, a divorce, a death, something happened, and then it's all of the behaviors that perpetuated the insomnia.
But is it true, would you say, that certain people just need less sleep?
Yes, totally.
And that can also be
Yes.
genetic.
100%. So that's actually a really good point, because one of the things that I talk about again in my sessions is when I do my media stuff, I always talk about how the average Canadian will need anywhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. And we come to that number because when we look at the research, the majority of folks fall in there. But there are outliers to everyone. So there are folks that need 4 to 6 hours. There are folks that need, 9, 10 hours. They're usually high performance athletes, but they generally need more or less sleep. Now, the tricky bit is that those groups of people, they're not a lot. They're probably, 1 to 5% of the population. But what I'm looking for with my clients is amount of sleep in a row altogether. So when you are waking up feeling refreshed and good, that's the number. I actually had a discovery call with a client about 3 months ago. And she's like, I've had a sleep study. I do not have anything wrong with my sleep. I've seen a doctor. I feel good. I feel amazing. My daughter says I should call you because I only sleep 6 hours a night. And I was like, okay, what are the outcomes? Like, how are you feeling? How's this? She's like, I feel fine. I feel good. And like, I run every morning. And I'm like, then that's the amount of sleep you need. There will be other things that happen. It's just like, parents get really preoccupied because of Dr. Google. Google says my child should sleep 12 hours. And I say, okay, how many hours is your child sleeping? Oh, they sleep 11. Okay. Are they happy? Yes. Rested? Yes. Playful? Yes. Peeing, pooping, eating? Yes. There's your answer. So I don't like to really eat. There's a whole other thing called orthosomnia, which is a preoccupation of the quality and quantity of sleep, which is really skyrocketed due to sleep trackers, all of these things that track your sleep and tell you the exact amount of REM sleep versus light sleep that you're having. And then people get in their heads and it actually creates insomnia rather than help your sleep.
Why are we so obsessed with sleep?
I think that we're coming into, just like we think that we can biohack everything. The biohacking is, you're Googling, it's like how to optimize my body, which is great in some ways, because I think that there's a lot of ways that we can probably help ourselves be the best version of ourselves. And definitely sleep is part of that. But I always say, like, you don't need a sleep tracker to tell you how rested you feel in the morning. You don't need, if you wake up feeling good, but your sleep tracker tells you otherwise, then that's wrong. It's not the other way around. And this tracking ability is so not accurate. These Oura rings, this thing, it's all like, it's not good data. It's really bad, actually. And the only way that we really know how we're sleeping is to have a medical sleep study, which is to have diodes all over your head and body that monitor your oxygen levels, your breathing. It's not as simple as like, I got this much REM sleep. I remember when I got a Fitbit for I shouldn't say the actual thing, but
it's okay.
I got a million years ago, I got a Fitbit. And it was actually right before I had my first child. And I would get up in the morning and I would look at my Fitbit and it'd be like, oh, everything's bad for you. And I'm like, well, I know that. Thank you. But the thing that I didn't understand is that it would constantly tell you how often you were waking. People don't know. The average person doesn't know that we all wake in the middle of the night. If you are not waking in the middle of the night, you're dead. Like, really.
So it's a good thing.
You have to wake. So then this Fitbit is like, just so you know, you woke up this many times, like as you should. Now, certain instances of waking and more prolonged waking may indicate something like apnea. And probably apnea has other symptoms of like excessive snoring, and you would feel like garbage in the morning too. But waking, anywhere from 4 to 6 times over the night is biologically normal. So to have a tracker be like, oh, just so you know you did that, it's like, well, I hope so. I'm alive. So I think that is playing a part, and just around like what the average person knows about sleep, and that sleep education, I think it's lacking, and that those gadgets perpetuate an anxiety that doesn't need to be there.
I've never heard of that before. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I think also it's a matter of what you do when you have those waking moments.
Yeah.
So the waking moments are normal, but if you wake up and then are like, okay, I'm up, I'm going to just look at my phone, I'm going to check my email, I'm going to check my Instagram, I'm going to go to the, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then I'm going to go downstairs and get something to drink.
Right.
I think we perpetuate those moments with certain behaviors. And I think those behaviors become habits.
Totally. I think about this, our bodies are so smart, right? So if you are waking up and you look at your phone, well, your phone has blue light that mimics the sun. That's sun exposure. We tell our brains, okay, I'm awake. You're essentially creating programs. So often I work with postpartum moms after I've helped their babies. And now they're saying, okay, well, my baby sleeps at 2 and 4. I'm up at 2 and 4. Why? Well, what were you doing before? Well, I was getting up and I was watching a computer. I was having a snack. I would go downstairs. Like your body thinks like, hey, this is what I do. So our behaviors can absolutely perpetuate it. Or I had a client that hired me, and he said, I've always been a bad sleeper. I've always been bad. In the first session that I have with people, I do like a psychoed around normal sleep. And I talk to him just about normal waking in the middle of the night. He had never been taught that. He was like, I'm going to come to your next session, but now that I know that waking and just being aware for a minute is normal, I just go back to sleep. It's what we tell ourselves in those moments. Oh gosh, I'm awake again. I knew I was awake again. Sometimes even just the knowledge that waking is normal can be enough to turn off that alarm bell in your brain to keep you awake.
That's true. I agree. Because in anticipation for this interview today, I woke up at 3 o'clock, because I always do. I always wake up at 3 o'clock, between 3 and 3:13 every single day. And usually I'll check my phone and just catch up on emails and stuff. But I didn't. I said, no, I'm interviewing Amanda today. And she might ask me about my sleep hygiene. So I'm not going to look at the phone.
Right.
And I fell back asleep really, really quickly.
Oh, okay. And now we've started a wave.
Maybe.
You have 100% started a wave, because now your brain says there's no reason to wake up. I mean, you will probably wake up at that time for a really long time. So here's the other part of that. We have hormones that kind of come and go throughout the day to kind of keep us asleep and wake us up. So cortisol and adrenaline, those have they have a bad PR team. Everyone wants to avoid them, but we need them. Cortisol and adrenaline keep us upright, awake, aware. Like we need these stress hormones. And at around, let's say dusk, your melatonin starts going up, 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 up. At around 12, 1, 2, it starts to plummet because we need to be awake for the day. So melatonin falls, and then what replaces that are all of our stress hormones to wake us up. This means I always talk about, like, when my children were younger, if they had a pee accident in bed, they would notice around 4 o'clock in the morning, which also coincides with my most wakeful time in that time. And then I can't go back to sleep because I'm like, my body's like, well, we're going to be awake anytime now. Like, let's do this. So there is some hormonal things happening where you should be more alert and aware. We have different type of sleep. We tend to sleep more in REM at that time. So what you might be describing as a period of wakefulness, you might actually be in stage 1 and stage 2 of sleep. Where if I put you on a medical sleep thingamajig, the doctors would say you're actually sleeping, and you would be like, no, I'm not, but you are in stage 2 of sleep where you can hear things, you might have more awareness, but biologically it's sleep, and which is probably the feeling you're getting after 3 o'clock. And then so when all of those are so many factors, like, so for 3 o'clock you get up. Now it's like the story you've told yourself is, this is when I wake up. Yes. I feel aware and alert. Why would I feel this way if it wasn't time to be awake? Here I go. And then when you get up, you do things, and it just makes it happen.
We can be our own worst enemies.
Totally. Yeah. It's crazy.
One of the things I find really interesting is that we're a very health conscious society. So we exercise. Well, most people exercise. People try to eat whole foods. They try to meditate. They do all these different things. But one of the things that really gets sacrificed is sleep.
Yes.
Why do you think that is, that sleep is always the thing that dies on the altar in terms of health?
I think that we're just starting to understand sleep. I know that, maybe for you and I, we're like, I read all the things about sleep, but I'm not late to this. But I think, even when was Arianna Huffington's book about sleep? That was what, like 10, 15 years ago? But I think that like these are just revolutionary ideas still. And I do think okay, so I had a friend very recently tell me, so I was at a girls' weekend and I was sort of sharing like, if I'm really tired, I won't work through it. I have the benefit of working from home. I will go upstairs. I will set my alarm for 25 minutes and I'll shut my eyes and I'll probably get through the first 2 stages of sleep, wake up, and I feel like a dream. And my friend said to me, there's so many things that I would rather be doing than napping. And I think that we have a very puritanical view and conservative view on sleep. Sleep still means laziness. Napping still means laziness. It means that we're not as productive. So while at the same time we are touting the benefits of health, we're trying to be the most productive. And if you can sacrifice something, it's always going to be sleep. We're still trying to do meditate. I mean, I could get into like a whole like raw thing about especially the women, mothers. We are meditating, exercising, planning, meal planning, doing all these things, and that all takes time. So the easiest thing to, get away from is like, well, how can I sleep the minimum amount but receive the most amount of benefits? Because I have to get in all the things of the day. I think that we live, especially in our modern society, in a very busy world, and we still think of sleep as laziness, as like non-productive, as, something that can be done at another time. And really, it should be the first thing to be able to do all the things.
And Arianna Huffington has written that we glamorize. The less we sleep, the more glamorized that is. And also, I think there's this notion that to get A's in school, you have to sacrifice Z's.
Yes.
So there's this preoccupation with productivity.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think sleep, it's called sleep shaming, is it not?
Yes. And I think about, just the ability to do things like your cognitive functioning is so much higher on a good night of sleep. Like you feel it. You feel that. Like you feel like you're present, you're there, you are connecting, your ability to retain information, all of the sort of behind the scenes things that are happening with your sleep that you're not even aware of. Even, this is something I've become really interested in. So Matthew Walker, who's sort of my guru because he is all about, he wrote the book, Why We Sleep, but he's a sleep researcher. So I follow his Instagram and he's always putting out something that I'm like, I got to learn everything about that. So his new thing that he's really kind of doubling down on is the idea of the REM rebound. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay. So when we consume alcohol, or in some cases cannabis, depending on how it's THC, CBD, depending on what that is and the ratios, people will say, well, these things help me fall asleep, or I sleep so deeply. And actually sleeping really deeply all night, this is another thing, is not accurate. Like I said, we do have those more wakeful moments in the morning, we wake, etc. So when we are saying I sleep so deeply, that's a big question mark. Like, why are you sleeping so deeply that you don't remember things? Often, so when we think about alcohol, for example, alcohol may speed up, it's called sleep onset. So like as you're falling asleep, you might fall asleep easily. But it actually changes, like you could sleep really deeply when you've had one too many glasses of wine. And we miss out on REM sleep when we do that. When we miss out on REM sleep, what we have found is that folks will have to rebound on REM, meaning that whatever they've lost on Saturday night, Sunday night, they're going to go to bed. It's going to be harder for them to fall asleep. And then number two, they're going to sleep in REM. And so it'll feel less deep. It'll feel like more of a restless sleep. And people will report like, oh, I'm not sleeping as well because of XYZ. I should maybe take the cannabis, or I maybe should drink again to have that deep sleep again. But what's really interesting is that if the brain is making up for it, it means that it is a requirement. We have to have it. And how many folks are going to bed on medicated sleep? I used to say, like when I was breastfeeding, I have a belief that like breast milk and unmedicated sleep are going to be like key health factors in our future. I really do believe that.
So you don't believe in taking CBD, THC, sleeping pills. What's your position on that?
It's not that I don't believe in it. It's more that where the research is now. So I find it really comforting to rely on research, but I'm open to changing my mind all the time based on research. So right now we just don't have enough good research to say that these, like, some people do report better sleep. And honestly, if you were to say I don't sleep at all whatsoever without this, but this allows you to, then I think it's a risk benefit decision, and one that you should probably make with your doctor, honestly. Cannabis, it depends. Like CBD is still showing promise. It's not psychoactive. So it depends on, and this is what when we're getting into the nitty gritty of cannabis, there are so many different compounds, variations. Um, the ratios, like I think it really depends. So my position is I don't know yet. The research tells us that we do have to have a REM rebound, especially with alcohol. We know that for sure with alcohol. And when we are missing out on something that the brain is making up on, for now I'm more conservative in that I would prefer, like, obviously live your life, right? Like I'm sure 1 or 2 nights is probably not going to make a huge deal for you. But if it's something that you've become reliant on, like anything, I think that's,
You have to take a closer look at it.
that's right.
What about sleep and empathy? I've read some studies that have said that you're not as empathetic if you're not well rested.
That's so I always talk about this. I'm often asked to talk about the spring, like all time change, but spring time change specifically is really interesting. They call the Monday after springtime change Sleepy Monday because in the spring, we spring forward. We actually lose an hour of sleep. And it's a more prolonged adjustment because when we spring forward, we actually go to bed earlier. I know this is confusing, but if you go to bed at 10 o'clock regularly, we spring forward. So 10 becomes 11 and 9 becomes 10. So we're actually going to bed at 9. And bodies don't like to do that. We don't like to go to bed early. It's harder for us to do that. So that adjustment from that hour can take weeks, sometimes 2 to 4 weeks for people. But the day after specifically, they call it Sleepy Monday. We know that judges give harsher penalties in court. So if you are scheduled for court, if you've done something very bad, not the Monday after, people experience more cardiovascular events. I really do believe, I mean, it's a mood thing, right? If we are cranky and we are not feeling 100%, it's going to be hard to give to others or take a moment of pause when we don't feel rested ourselves.
That makes perfect sense. That's very logical. I read a statistic that said that divorce rates for night workers are 6 times higher than the average person.
I mean, I believe that for many, many reasons. The social worker in me goes to like all of the systems and structures of why that probably is. And I think about, I mean, when you are someone, and I know this in a very small way because my husband travels, and we've been able to make our relationship work because I have a very flexible type of employment. So I can work little or as much or as little as I want to. But I think that if I weren't able to do that, and I did work a 9 to 5 for a really long time, that would be hard because just the way the systems and structures of your life are different. And then, I mean, there's danger pay involved in a shift work and night work. And I forget who I was telling this to, but I was sharing with them, no, it's a dangerous position to be up all night long. It really, I mean, we know that folks who aren't sleeping with a natural like sunlight exposure aren't really getting good quality sleep. I mean, it can be those systems and structures. I can think about like, I would not do well. Like, I'm just telling you right now, I would not be a nice person. I think every time I do morning TV, I'm like, thank goodness I do this once a month. And I have to like the amount of concealer and like coffee I need for that one day, if that was my everyday, and those folks get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I just couldn't.
But they must go to bed at like 8 or 9 or something, right?
I know, but the body is not easily, especially like, it's it's not just easy to say, okay, I'll sleep all day and be awake all night. There are environmental factors. We forget that we're a part of the planet.
Of course.
And I always, this is really true in the spring with my baby clients, because everyone, if you were to do like I think about this all the time because I don't know, you know, the things that stick in your brain, you're like, why is this here? I think I was in grade 12 and we visited the National Archives. And I remember this stuck in my brain forever. The woman said, make sure that you share your email passwords because we won't have handwritten letters anymore to look at human behavior or like look at societal events. So share your passwords so we can read your emails in the future. I don't know why this is in my head. And what I think about all the time is my flow of email inquiries in my inbox would show that people experience early morning wakings in the spring, summer. So especially where we are, the sun starts going up at 4 o'clock. Babies don't care. Babies can't tell time. They're like, great, the sun is up, so am I. So we have to do some environmental work to make sure that we're not responding in that way. But even then, you have a baby that's up at 7, 8 all winter long, and then in the summer is still up no matter what. They can be in a box. They're still up at 6, 7 because there's increased light. There's all of these environmental factors telling us when to be awake and when to be asleep. So if we are awake in the middle of the night, our body is literally like, we don't do this. And like that alone is a stress. And then sleeping all day when your body is having that cortisol and adrenaline saying, hey, wake up. It's not easily shifted like that. So I'm not saying that all people doing that would experience health challenges, because I think, to your point, everyone's so different. And I do think that people probably in morning stuff vibe with that because there's a natural inclination. But I do think like true shift workers or like people up all night for work, I really don't know how there wouldn't be some long-term impact. And like if you're looking at a grocery store position, they will generally say, we need people, night stalkers, stock our shelves. They're getting paid $10 more than their counterparts for a good reason, because there are those significant health challenges associated with that.
It makes sense. I think a lot of the stuff that I read said that people should rotate schedules. Like you shouldn't consistently do night work. You need to take like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off to just recalibrate. I think a lot of medical professionals also have that luxury.
Yes, I have a family member who works in shift work, and it's similar, that it's a rotation. It's never just one thing anymore. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, yeah. I'm thinking of socioeconomic socioeconomics and sleep. So I'm wondering, like you're talking about a clerk that's like restocking the shelves. I'm wondering what the correlation is between socioeconomic status and sleep. Like, are people who are living in poverty, are they sleeping less well? People who are living paycheck to paycheck, are they sleeping less well? How do you have data on that, or just anecdotally even?
I mean, I think about like anecdotally, I grew up in poverty. I have a very close, it's not a faraway memory, or it's not something I've studied. I've lived in poverty. I will say that, you know, even just knowing some of my clients or thinking back to my own childhood, especially now, the cost of living, affordability, housing, it's out of control. Many folks I know are working multiple jobs to make things work. There's no rest period when you are poor. there's no ability to rest. And like the ability to rest right now is something that you pay for and is a privilege in our society, unfortunately. If you are working 2 jobs, even if you get to be home at, let's say, 10 o'clock, you haven't had any rest period. At the very least, right, you're going straight to bed and then you're up the next day to work. That's no way to live.
Yes.
I think that I do think that people in poverty are probably sleeping less well. Even like things like, I go on TV and I talk about products to help your sleep, or, the most advanced mattress or pillow. Like, I always sort of think about like people who are poor are not thinking about the thickness of their pillow. They are thinking about, how am I going to go to work tomorrow? How am I, know? So I even think about, with my more, what's the word? Like higher earning, affluent, I deal with a lot of type A powerful people in my practice as well, who are running the show. They are, top, but there's a lot of stress involved in that. And I think about the stress of having a lot of money and the stress of having no money are significant on the body. It's like, how do you calm your jets at night when you're making potentially life or death decisions, or you're making, life-changing decisions, or if I don't make this money, I don't get to pay rent, or you're picking up that odd job, working Uber all night. Like I could see how that would really impact the ability to have a very dreamy sleep.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I hear this from friends, and I'm not speaking personally, I'm speaking about friends.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So what if you have a partner or a spouse that snores? Do you think it's detrimental for couples you think it's better for couples to sleep together in the same bed? Or is it better if someone is disrupting someone else's sleep, for the other person to sleep in a separate room?
One of the things that's all the rage right now is something called the sleep divorce, where folks sleep separately, but they're still married. And it might be because of work conditions, like hours they come home, can be due to snoring. Maybe the other person's very restless, keeps the other person up. I go into the systems. I think about like, how is the whole system of that family working? If it were me, I could not handle being woken up often. So I would probably say, I love you, but I'm sleeping elsewhere. My partner doesn't. I mean, he might snore sometimes, but it's not enough for me to leave the room, but I would 100%. I do think it depends. Like some people snore and it's not impacting them. If it's impacting you, I think that, there's lots of people doing it. And I think about the overall relationship improvements that might happen. I would be very resentful of my partner if he kept me up all night. So if I felt good and that wasn't a part of our day-to-day conversation, I can't see that being a bad thing.
Right.
For sure.
Interesting. I've never heard of sleep divorce. That's a good term.
Yeah, it's all the rage right now. And I think people are more open to it, because I think previously it used to mean like, oh, something's wrong in their relationship. But I think as people learn about sleep and they value sleep, they're like, no, actually, we just value our sleep. It doesn't have to have all of this contextual meaning.
Okay, another question I have, I'm asking on behalf of a friend.
Yes.
Is co-sleeping with a 5-year-old?
Yeah, I know what I do, and I help people independently sleep when that's what they want. But if both people are sleeping and both people want to be co-sleeping, there's no reason to change that relationship.
So that's not against the Bible of sleep clinicians or consultants?
I think that culturally, co-sleeping has been practiced for years and years and years, millions of years. I don't know if millions is not the right term, but like it's a cultural practice that exists everywhere. And I do think that you can develop sleep behaviors that are reliant on another person, but that can still result in good sleep. I don't think it's for me. I tried co-sleeping actually, and I was like, woo, like my brain could not shut off. It wasn't for me. But I have very close friends that still co-sleep with their kids and they sleep well, so does their child. And then that's where I get into, if it's not something you want, it will never work because your child will feel like something's off and wrong.
Right.
If it's something that you really need and you see a means to an end, that's different. If you like doing it, there's no need to change.
COVID, I think it messed up people's sleep, especially kids. I think a lot of kids became unregulated because of the sleep disruptions and COVID. There was such a big change in the world.
Yes.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I'm really interested in teen sleep because of my work as an educator in that population for so long, and I saw the impacts. And then I started doing sleep work, and learning about teen sleep was so interesting. So teens have something called delayed sleep phase syndrome, and that's something that happens around 13, where they want to go to bed late and wake up late. I remember myself, like I would get up at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. It was crazy. But and for a lot of parents, again, they're like, that is a concern for them, right? They see their child sleeping late and they think that something is wrong, when really their alerting system internally is telling them to do things at different times. So they could get 8 hours of sleep, they're just delayed. Now, the tricky bit about teens specifically is that pre-COVID, or pre-lockdowns, I should say, we were like, kids are overscheduled. They're up until midnight, and then they have to be up at 6 o'clock the next day to go to school or to catch a bus to go. I mean, that's a whole other socioeconomic thing. I mean, depending on where you are in location to your school. But yeah, kids are having to get up early to go to school. They're not ever really getting enough sleep. So there's a 2016 study that talked about how about a third of teens aren't sleeping enough. Only 70% of teens get a recommended 8 to 10 hours. And 8 to 10 hours that's another thing I want to focus on, because I think that when people see a teenager that resembles a mini adult, we think, yeah, you need 7 to 9. No, they actually need 8 to 10 hours for a really long time. So they're not getting enough sleep. They're overscheduled, all of those things. So now lockdowns happen, and the flexibility with online school, kids started to report more sleep in lockdowns because they now had the freedom to sleep and do whatever they want and school at their own schedule. Then they go back to school. And again, this is going to be hard again for kids to do this. Now, the tricky bit about lockdowns is that we had an over-reliance on screens, computers, phones, tablets. They're all in front of us, especially for kids. So kids are now doing online school on a tablet. There was a study that came out May of this year that said that teens, so between 13 and 18 years old, are spending as much time on their devices as they are sleeping post-lockdown.
That's scary.
So we've really developed some unhealthy reliance on these tools that were really helpful during lockdowns that are actually, now we need to really evaluate screen use, a lot of screen addiction. I was a social worker in the school board last year. Lots of screen addiction, lots of video game addiction. It's not a joke, like you're addicted to your screen. It is actually a thing. So I think that we're starting to see the outcomes of that. And not to mention that COVID lockdowns and COVID in general were extremely stressful on everyone. And if you think about teens specifically, I think about the lack of those social emotional relationships at times where it's so vital to the development of a teen. Yeah, I'm curious about what the long-term impacts are, and I think that we're still seeing that
I think
research.
so too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we are. We started, and you were talking about sleep hygiene. I've heard of that term before, but let's talk a little bit more about sleep hygiene.
Yeah, I think that in our busy world, our very connected world, and I put myself in this, I find myself doing the things that I tell my clients not to do all the time. But I'm a good sleeper, so the impacts aren't as tough. But recently, doing things like bringing your phone into your bedroom, then we just snuggle into bed, we look at Instagram or TikTok, or we might look at our work email, especially for folks who work in these multinational corporations where you could get a stressful email at 2 a.m. Keep your phone out of your bedroom.
Okay.
I cannot stress enough how disabling they are for sleep. It's literally like having a mini sun. It decreases your melatonin production before bed. We know this, a minimum of 30%. Try to avoid that. Try to avoid eating alcohol, cannabis.
For how much before you go to sleep?
I want to say about an hour. Alcohol and cannabis, maybe a little bit longer. You'd want those effects to be kind of out of your system by the time you're going to sleep. Eating is really about like digestion, right? Our bodies like to rest and finish their digestion. Like everything slows down. We don't want to be peeing and pooping in the middle of the night, so we shouldn't be eating as well. That whole system wants to shut down. But if you are eating, I always talk about how the first week of lockdowns, I ate a full bag of Lay's dill pickle chips, and then I was digesting them in my sleep, and I was like, oh, now I realize why I don't make this suggestion. But it can really impact the quality of your sleep. Really, I always, if you can, I suggest a wind down hour, like a full hour of no screens. I know this is hard to do, but no screens, low light activities, take a shower, take a bath. This is where I do my skincare routine. I will read a book. And then people say, does my Kobo count as a book? If it is a screen, it contains blue light. And so I personally, I would remove it if I had sleep problems, especially, but get an actual book that we hold in our hands and move the pages. Yeah.
What about taking melatonin?
Yeah, so I'm not against melatonin. I do recommend melatonin in some cases, especially for things like jet lag, where we want to kind of remind our bodies when to produce hormones at certain times. So if your body is like used to going to bed, 12 hours at the opposite, melatonin might help your jet lag significantly get back on track. If you have delayed sleep phase syndrome, if you're an adult who really has gotten their whole schedule out of whack and you're going to bed super late and you really want to bring it back, melatonin can be extremely helpful. I I get a lot of news alerts about melatonin, especially in children. I think that melatonin felt like a safe thing to give to children for a long time. I don't know that it's not. I just think that a lot of researchers and doctors are sort of sounding the alarm that children are overdosing on melatonin at rates we've never seen pre-lockdowns.
What does that look like, overdosing on melatonin? Not waking up?
It means that they're like very like lethargic, or like they might be sleeping too much, but they're finding themselves in the emergency room and melatonin is the culprit. I think how the stat was, I'm going to say it wrong, so fact check this, but I think it was like during lockdowns, they had gone up like 217%, like something crazy. So it's a conversation that I would be having with a doctor about dosing and when to have the dose. We can go into the grocery store and get melatonin, but we wouldn't go and buy estrogen. We wouldn't go and buy testosterone. It is essentially the same thing. And the only reason that we're allowed to produce melatonin is because it is naturally occurring in almonds and cherries and other foods. So it's, a natural product. But because this hormone is produced in I want to say a potentially unregulated way, we just never know exactly what we're getting. So you really want to be able to trust your brand that you're using, and there are lots of great brands that I recommend. But I think that it's always a conversation that I wouldn't self-diagnose. And I wouldn't self-dose. Have a chat with your doctor because it is a hormone, and you want to make sure, especially with melatonin, less can sometimes be more. If you're taking a ton, it might have other impacts. So I'm not against it. Have a chat with your doctor.
Okay. Last tip, any really magic tip? I know you said there's no magic, but what is the greatest tip that you could leave us with about sleep? It could be about sleep hygiene, or it could just be a kernel of wisdom that you've developed through all this work that you've done in the arena of sleep.
Yeah, I really think sleep is, we keep talking about what's the most amount of sleep? What's the best amount of sleep? I really think that we are our own experts about what we need. And I wouldn't focus so much on like Googling the best, most optimal sleep. I want you to ask yourself, and this is advice for kids too, is your child rested? Are you rested? Do you feel good? Do you have energy to do things? When you wake up in the morning, how do you feel? Do you feel like you can go back to bed, or do you feel like you're ready to start the day? How do you end your day? Are you wired? Do you ask yourself these questions about you. Sleep is so personal. And I hope that we are getting to points like with medicine. I think we're going to see all of this about personalized, targeted care to that particular person. So focus more on you. If you get 5 hours and you're like my client who's like, my daughter is making me call you, then you're probably fine. Have that chat with your doctor. But if you feel good, you probably are. On the flip side, if you're tired, if you're, you can't function, you find like you're falling asleep at weird times, get a chat with your doctor. Always have a chat with your doctor. It can be nothing, it can be something, but you are the best indicator of how you're doing.
Thank you so much for talking to me today. How do people find you?
For babies, babiesbestsleep.com. For adults, restmybest.com. And on Instagram at both of those handles. So at babiesbestsleep or at restmybest. I give as much, and I should say TikTok as well. I do more long form videos, especially about insomnia.
On TikTok, what's your handle?
At babiesbestsleep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yay, thank you. It was so fun.
It was.